I'm excited for this moment.
Okay.
To see if it's going to work.
All right, everybody. For those of you who are watching on Facebook, you probably are still there. If you are watching this on YouTube or Twitter, and I guess you are because numbers are starting to climb, remember, I'm a newbie at all this. I'm still learning. Apparently, I didn't click all the buttons to make sure that the stream went live on YouTube and Twitter, so we were just going live on Facebook. I need to do better, Nick. I did not put myself in a good position.
We're going between the game. It's like red zone right now. This is you were experiencing what it would be like to be a director during red zone. You're like, hey, we're gonna go get away from that Ravens-Rams game to go over here to Chiefs-Bills.
That's better than what I was thinking, which I was thinking that I just did not put myself in the position to make a play. And right now, I am not putting my best reps on tape, so I need to do better.
We all have our struggles, Matt. You just got to work through them. That's all I can tell you.
Well, since you're kind enough to join me here, Nick, I mean, we'll just give the Chiefs Digest version, of the news of the day, and then start breaking it down because, as I'm sure you've all heard by now, Skyy Moore has gone to injured reserve. Justin Ross has had the roster exemption removed from him. And now the Chiefs are back to 53 players on the active roster, and they have 6 receivers. It's just a little bit different group. Skyy was actually one of 3 receivers that this team had who played all 14 games so far this season. So now they are down to just 2 receivers who played all 14 games, with Rashee Rice and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I think that a fact alone is probably another good indication about why the Chiefs have struggled with chemistry when you've only had 2 receivers who've played all 14 games. But that is where the Chiefs are. I was not terribly surprised. I mean, I don't know about you, Nick, but when Andy Reid talked about Skyy leaving the game yesterday with a swollen knee, this seemed like pretty good possibility that this might happen.
Yeah, once Andy said that in the press conference, the post-game press conference, I was like, well, you can put him on IR, give him 3 to, depending on how long it's going to take, depending on what the injury may be, give him 3 to 4 weeks. It allows you to get a roster spot for either McColl or Justin Ross, and then you just, let Skyy heal up, reset mentally, physically, whatever you need to do, and then if there is an injury down the road, you're hoping there isn't, but if there is an injury down the road, and you get to that divisional AFC championship round and you need him back, then you could potentially work him back. So, I mean, it gives them that opportunity with Skyy potentially, getting his knee right and getting healed up in whatever way. And, so Justin Ross, as you put out there, and there was on the, put out there that he's coming back, he's taking that active roster spot. So, question will be, how long is it going to take to build that chemistry back up with Patrick Mahomes? Haven't been away for that length of time for nearly 2 months. What can they get in rhythm? Is he still a package guy because of how much time he missed? And he's got a handful of plays, and you use them like you would Jody Fortson tight end style, some fade routes, some contested catch type stuff. Are you going to try to work him in slants? I think people that are expecting more than 10 to 15 snaps are going to, when they see the snap count come out a week from tomorrow, I think people will be bummed about that. But I am curious to see, with Richie James, whenever I can't remember if it was you or who asked about the snap count, and he brought up that and said that Richie needed more than 2 snaps.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Richie James separately later, but I completely agree. I did ask him that, and I completely agree. I mean, I would love to see Richie James get more work because I think he's a really good receiver and would like to see what he could do in a bigger role. Like you mentioned, I mean, with Justin, I think it's important for people to probably have some, realistic expectations. His most snaps that he played all in the first 7 games was 29 snaps, and that was against Chicago, when obviously a lot of the backups got work, and that was absolutely, Justin Ross's kind of role. He got some snaps there. Interestingly enough, I mean, he did play 17 snaps in the final game he played against the Chargers, and that was his second most amount of usage. And, sometimes sometimes teams do that when they know a guy's going out. Maybe they'll play him a little bit more. Maybe at the same time, that was an indication that he was getting a little bit more adjusted. But you kind of hit on what Andy Reid's leaned on a lot in the first 7 weeks of the season when we talked about Justin Ross, is that he's going to be a package dependent guy. He's really going to play when they've got some things in there specifically for him. I am not expecting Justin Ross to come in and all of a sudden be one of their top 3 receivers and a starter. I think the realistic expectation is that if he plays this week, it's going to be as what you mentioned. I mean, there's going to have specific roles for him, specific assignments, jobs. Maybe it is some of the red zone stuff that Jody Fortson did in the past. Obviously, he's got the body for the jump ball, so you could put some of those things in. But moderation is probably my watchword for Justin Ross.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you one bit on that, because when he was coming out of college, what I saw from him is he's a guy who needed 10 yards to get up to full speed and get up to full strength, and then be able to cut off his routes, even though they weren't the most crisp at the time. In this final year there, that was on tape, coming off some of the injuries and everything. So when you'd watch him run the slant, I remember against the Vikings, or kind of his comeback and everything, like some of those didn't really, from a timing perspective, I don't know if they were in sync with Patrick to a certain extent. I know he had a drop on that the comeback route against the Vikings there, and so he really missed a lot of quality weeks that they could have used him to kind of help him hit where people were fans and maybe even the team were hoping he would be at, and what they would want him to be at this current time and space. So in some ways, I feel like they're starting over from scratch. And I feel like, this is where you're kind of at the initial spot where you were in September, or maybe even part of training camp. And the question becomes, how quickly can him and Patrick get back on the same page over these next, hopefully, 3 weeks before, playoffs, whenever you really need everybody to step up in that regard. But I feel like Rashee Rice ended up taking a lot of those snaps, the developmental snaps, and he became that guy who Mahomes could trust with the back shoulder or throwing a contested catch and things of that nature. So that's where I kind of feel like that's where Ross lost a lot of that development with the situation that occurred. And now he's going to have to try to play catch up in terms of creating that chemistry with Mahomes again. And when he gets back out there, it's probably going to be a whole different, it's going to take a little adjustment period being back out there, going against guys at full speed out there and everything in a game situation. And so, I mean, anything he gets more than 10 snaps, I think is going to be pretty impressive for a first game back in nearly 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, I mean, we're talking about swapping out Skyy Moore for Justin Ross on the roster, but those two are completely opposite style of receivers. I mean,
Right.
It's not like they're playing the same position. So, it's not as if, there's now suddenly, because, Skyy was, even though he only played, I think, 16 snaps yesterday, and his usage had really varied. I mean, as far as, specific opponents, I mean, they did some things with him a little bit differently at times, depending on what the scheme was that week and who they were playing and what they were trying to get accomplished. But he averaged 35 snaps a game. So there's still a lot of work. Now, some of those snaps you could maybe say have gone to Rashee Rice, but I think he's also taken a lot more from Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I mean, as Rashee's work has gone up, Marquez's numbers have gone down. But to me, and this is where Andy Reid said today about getting Richie James more than 2 snaps, Richie James is more of a swap out for Skyy Moore to me than anybody else on this roster.
Yeah, and I think the way you bring that up is perfectly. Like we talked on, 41 is the Mike podcast yesterday, or was it early morning at this point? I don't remember.
I think it was both.
It happened. It was around 11:30 or midnight, and it's technically Monday then. I don't remember. But, for each guy, there's somebody that they're kind of an equal to, that kind of one for one type of thing. Like you said it perfectly, where Richie James could rotate into that Skyy Moore aspect. McCole Hardman, if he comes back, him and Kadarius Toney are basically the same gadget player. So it's kind of the one for one potentially there. Although Kadarius Toney is really good punt returner. And depending on what defenses they're going up against, like I think that's where Kadarius Toney can make a massive difference, just because the excitement he can create as a returner. is, you don't know. Can he get you to the 15 with the way that offense had struggled? He gave some sparks that day when he was back at returner, but then he also got hurt. And then that took him, out of the offense to a certain extent, dropped the snap count the following week. So, then you're back at square one. But, and then with Justin Ross, I feel like you got to mentally think of him more as like a Jody Fortson. And then kind of Rashee Rice is kind of he's one of the few that's kind of he's his own player, to where he's not, him and MVS don't necessarily have the same thing, because MVS and Justin Watson to me are kind of the same. They're the same receiver now these days in terms of what they do and what the clear outs and how Mahomes can get the ball to him. I think Rice is kind of the standalone 1-for-1 guy right now, or, on his own. There's no 1-for-1. He's just on his own and on an island, to where he has the possession ability. He has the athletic ability, but above all else, he's the other playmaker besides Travis. So I feel like over these next 3 weeks, can you develop another wide receiver that can be that guy? Or is there somebody you can use out of the backfield, whether it's Kadarius Toney or McCole Hardman or Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Jerick McKinnon, that you can use as that receiving threat? So you have Kelsey and you have Rice and you have, and then you have that receiving threat that can isolate against safeties and linebackers. And I think that's kind of where you're trying to fine tune some things before you get to the either wild card or divisional round, how things shake out.
I am going to do something that I don't normally do, Nick, but I'm going to do a very forced comparison. Because I don't like to do this, because I don't think it's entirely fair to the players.
But as far as a hockey match where they have the photo of the person from the office and then they find somebody in the stands, is it like that, or is it something different?
It might be kind of like that. And you know what, I did want to say real quick, thank you, Jack, for gifting another 5 memberships to Chiefs Digest on YouTube. If they haven't been claimed yet, go get them. Jack is very kind to do that. No, I mean, I wanted to, put the Chiefs receiver room right now in comparison to the, kind of 2019, 2018 ideal of when the Chiefs offense was really cooking. And I say it's a force because the Chiefs don't have to have a receiver room like that. They won a Super Bowl last year that didn't have Tyreek Hill, McCole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, and Sammy Watkins. But if I had to do comps for them, I mean, honestly, to me, Rashee Rice is what you dream Sammy Watkins would be. I mean, Sammy Watkins was a good player, but Rashee Rice is kind of Sammy Watkins plus right now. I mean, especially with the way he's producing. The question is, who's your Tyreek? I mean, they were hoping Kadarius Toney would be that. He hasn't been that. And I don't think you have one. I mean, you really don't. I mean, but of this group right now, the receiver to me who's best situated to maybe play that role is probably Richie James, but not in the production. I mean, I'm not expecting Richie James to be, the equivalent of a 1,200-yard receiver over the next 3 games. But to me, I mean, that's what's, like I said, we're shoehorning guys in here. But is Marquez Valdes-Scantling your DeMarcus Robinson? I mean, that's an okay comp for me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, you would love for what Marquez is making to have more production, but I don't hate that comparison.
It's funny you brought up DeMarcus Robinson, because that's when they had when I was building the free agency list on KSHB and wrote down all that aspect of it. That's actually who I said, for Valdes-Scantling at the time. I was like, hey, he could be a solid 3, maybe, a 4. And he could kind of fill that DeMarcus Robinson role, because that's what you saw from him, both size, athletically, to where he can make some tough catches and he can do some of those things. But look, I mean, the reality of it is on this is that DeMarcus would at least attempt to go up and get a football or fight for a football. Valdes-Scantling doesn't really have that same level and competitiveness, because if he did, I think that pass interference goes differently in Green Bay, and some other potential contested catches where the ball may look underthrown or may look overthrown, but if you're running at a different speed than your quarterback's expecting, how many times you ran them, those are the results of what happens with that. And again, he's putting up a spot for you to compete for it and go catch it, because it's not everything's going to be perfect all the time from a production, from footwork and everything. So, I mean, that's part of what you're getting paid for. And so that's another one of those attention to detail things, and competitiveness in general to have. So that's, yeah, I don't know. You've got me really intrigued by this wide receiver comparison aspect of it now, because now I'm thinking back to that 2018 team. The only one that even is in the ballpark from a speed perspective would be McCole if he comes back from IR after the hand thing.
McCole could beat your own McCole.
Yes. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, you were hoping Kadarius Toney could be that kind of quick twitch athletic guy, but no, I mean, yeah, that's where a lot of this problem is coming from, is that you don't have, when you're comparing it to 2018, you really don't have that threat that scares defenses deep like Tyreek could. And you're not necessarily, for people down the road, you're not necessarily needing someone to become Tyreek. You don't need to find, you're not going to find somebody that encompasses all that together. He was a very rare individual. Whenever, like I've said this many times, when he walked out on the practice field for the first time, and Therese Paylor and I were chatting with each other that day, and we were like, oh, wow. It's like, the year before we'd watched Chris Conley, run a deep post, and what the Chiefs had before speed-wise, we're like, wow, okay, Chris Conley's good. Then you saw Tyreek, and you're like, no, okay, that's the new reference point of what speed is. That's a whole different ball game of speed. And, and then you see Tyreek, and Tyreek, man, like he was a stacked dude. And like, you knew with that, very rarely do you find guys speed and athletic wise that can take the wear and tear of the NFL, but maintain their speed and maintain all that. Tyreek is a guy, the way he could track a football, no matter where it was thrown, and have the ability to turn on yet another gear to accelerate up to it and catch up to it, or just the way he could see and cut back. But the thing that made him special in Kansas City was he could catch a football and completely downshift like in a car, but then accelerate immediately and be back at top end speed. That's why corners just couldn't handle it, and that's why they still can't handle him, because there's very few guys that can throttle back and then just turn it from 0 to 100 without a problem, and then or even be able to maintain the balance and speed that he does. That's why, everything that he had quality wise, you're rarely going to find in receivers. I'm not saying you won't ever find it again, but it's just very rare to encompass all that together and to find all that.
And to me, I mean, you don't need, and for this, once again, the forced comparison here, you don't need your Tyreek Hill player. And let's say I'm calling that, Richie James right now, for lack of a better comparison, but the guy I think production wise could kind of do it. I mean, yes, I agree. He's not the best match from a speed standpoint, but I think probably Kadarius and McCole are better suited to the McCole of 2018, 2019 kind of role, but 2019 role. But, if, you don't have to have your speed guy getting you 1,400 yards if your Sammy Watkins, aka Rashee Rice, can get you 1,400 yards. And no, that's not the season that Rashee Rice is having, but it's the month he's having. I mean, that's the last 4 games, what he's looking like. And so, yeah, I mean, you don't have to have your speed guy getting you 1,200 yards. He can get you 600-700 yards, but the Chiefs aren't getting that right now either, which is a part of the problem. But I mean, I feel like with Rashee Rice, they've solved one question. I mean, they've answered that. Now they've just got some other questions to answer going forward. And hey, can they cobble it together for this season? I mean, I have my doubts, but I think they obviously with Rice have a really solid piece for the future.
Yeah, and then like we just talked about, it's a matter of who's number 3. Who can be that third individual that forces defenses to play honest and cannot double Kelsey? Rice is helping make that case for you week by week, and you need him to keep making that case. Now who's the third guy? And in that time, can you find somebody that you can throw some deep shots to in the next handful of weeks, if that is Kadarius Toney, if that does become McCole Hardman or somebody that can scare safeties and give you that explosiveness deep or not. Those are the next 2 things to watch for, is who is that third option, and is there a deep threat option, and can the Chiefs kind of open it up more and have the protection that they need on on both ends, and not have to keep a running back in that can allow them to have that. Because then you also got to work on with Pacheco as Andy said in the presser that you and I were both on earlier today, that Pacheco was going to be back on Monday. So then you bring back that power run game. You blend that with McKinnon, maybe with Clyde, whatever. But yeah, these next 3 weeks, from a mentality perspective, like we talked about, you're hoping that they start treating this like this is the playoffs, or start getting into that mindset, just like the Bills had the past 2 weeks and had a very dominant performance against the Cowboys. The Chiefs need to start having those dominant performances and start getting into that mindset, so they're not trying to start up or, think of it like a George Foreman grill. You're not waiting 5 minutes for it to get going. You've already been heating it up the past 3 weeks so that you can put those, chicken, the chicken on the grill before it expires later tonight. That I just remind myself I have to do. Because that's 4 chicken breasts. I think to put on the grill before it expires, because it said the 18th. But that's what you want to see from this Chiefs offense, is get that George Foreman grill heated up and kind of get in that mindset, so you're not flipping that switch when playoff starts. You're already there. The oven's already preheated for the playoffs.
And I do want to take some questions, so we will go over to the stream here in a little bit.
Yeah, I can do one, and then I got to go get that pizza that we talked about, because I am behind. So
okay. Then I'm gonna put you under the spot here.
Okay.
And you can punt this if you need to. If you need to pull out a Tommy Townsend and drop this at the 1 centimeter line, go for it. But let's talk about Kadarius Toney, because Andy Reid's comments today, if you haven't heard them, it wasn't the worst thing for Kadarius Toney, but it went from we believe in Kadarius, we trust Kadarius, a lot of loving him up, to, well, I'm not going to get into that. He's a good kid. He needs to catch the ball. Not going to get into that. I could be proven wrong, but to me, that was Andy Reid saying, yeah, we're going to have to make some changes. We're going to have to make some adjustments here, because we can't keep having this happen.
Well, you need to see, if I was in his shoes out on the practice field this week, I need to see something. I need to see a different approach this week. What are you doing to, in terms of whether it's the jugs machine catching a ton of passes? What are you doing in the film room with Patrick to get on that understanding? What are you doing, on your own, on your downtime, to kind of help get in the right frame of mind, or get into the mind that you need to perform at your best ability? Because I feel like he's kind of down on himself, and I think the Bills game got to him, and just the week that he had probably got to him, and I just felt like it happened. I think it was in his head, and I think that drop, or the bobble up for the interception, I think that got in his head, because if I'm in the Chiefs coaching staff shoes, I'm like, hey, to have trust in you, this can't keep happening, because that play could be the difference between continuing on in the playoffs and a Super Bowl run and the season ending, because those things are all going to get magnified more than they are now, because it just takes one series for that to happen. And having been through what you were against Buffalo with the simple attention to detail by being over that line, you can't have that happen. And there was a couple times when, I saw him point, but then he didn't stay with it. And yes, thumbs up, thumbs down, pat on the leg. Did we get it? Okay, we're good. And so those are a couple of occurrences where you're like, hey, look, those things have to be fixed, and you have to show that you care about that attention to detail, and that you want to correct all those things to get those snaps on the field. So we'll see what happens, and I think the snap counts over the next couple of weeks will answer those questions for us. And it's just a matter of waiting until those numbers come out to see kind of where the results were, because we've already seen the problems in the past 2 games. Now, where's the comeback from this? Where do you go from here? Do you kind of battle through it? But I do love, I had an AP Images photo that I used on the show last night on Sunday Sound Off of Travis Kelce with his arm around Kadarius Toney and being a leader and talking to him. And, that's what good teammates are. And Travis Kelce's a phenomenal teammate and goes to war for all his guys, and Patrick will as well. So it's just a matter of, can he get back into the right headspace that allows him to be as productive as he's capable of and kind of be one of those difference makers that the Chiefs need.
And and to me, it could be maybe what we see this week is a reverse of what happened with Skyy last year when, his confidence really got shattered working on special teams.
Yeah.
They gave him a break. He goes back to just focusing on offense, and I think it absolutely helped his game. If you're going to give Richie James a bigger role, I know the Chiefs would like to give their kick returner, punt returner some time off. I wouldn't surprise me if they flipped him, put Kadarius Toney as the return specialist this week, gave him fewer snaps on offense, and let Richie James have a run. I think that'd be great for Kadarius to just get a breather. Let him just focus on one role and take a deep breath because, right now he does look like his confidence has eroded a bit, but he still hasn't lost that locker room. That's the thing that you do get and sense from that reaction from Kelsey is that, he's still part of that team. They're that's not like they want him gone. They just want him to be the Kadarius that they believe he can be.
Right, and that's the thing about the Chiefs locker room. That's why they've had the success that they've had over all these years. Is that they don't turn their back on guys that were that worked with it and were a part of training camp, OTAs, and we're there for every single moment of it. And we're there to kind of help battle through those tough days and everything of that nature, whether, he was technically, on the field or not because of the knee injury and the knee scope and everything. But I don't think the team's given up on him. I don't think the locker room's given up on him. It's just a matter of how can you help him kind of reset and work through it and try to get the best out of him. But I'm telling you, as a punt returner, he's going to make special teams nervous, and he could actually create some things to get him to the 50. And any short field that the Chiefs can get and not have to drive 80, 90, 100 yards, that is always a plus if they can get that.
Nick, I truly appreciate you stopping by tonight, especially after our late night and on your day off. So go enjoy that pizza.
Day off tomorrow too, man. I got a whole bunch of days off coming up here. Apparently it's a holiday week or something.
It's a December to remember for Nick Jacobs.
That's right. That's all December's is for me to remember. Hopefully. All right, I gotta get my pizza. I'll see you guys.
Go get your pizza, cook the chicken. We will catch up with you later.
Oh, yeah,
thanks, Nick.
Dude. Thanks for reminding me. Touche, sir. Touche. Until next time, I bet you do.
I do. Take care. All right, everybody. Appreciate Nick stopping by. I know we haven't gotten to your questions yet, but I am going to get to them now. And I know everybody probably wants to get off and watch some Monday Night Football, and I want to join you. So I'll try and answer them more rapidly than maybe I pontificate sometimes. So Brandon was the first one in here. Chiefs will be better with Skyy on the bench. Agree. Can I say different? I do think that, Skyy's been struggling. There's no doubt about it. Can whomever gets the snaps in place of Skyy be worse than what he has been this season? Skyy has struggled. There's no doubt. He's been, and I was looking at the snap counts and everything earlier today. His numbers by and large are almost identical to what they were last year. I think 249 yards this year, 250 I think yards last year. Very similar catch percentage. Rushing attempts and yards, it's almost identical. The one difference is that he has like 150 more snaps this year. So, he hasn't been as productive to a degree as he was last season in the same kind of workload. So, hey, Skyy, it's an injury, so he needs time to recover. But if this is just a good moment for him to get a break and kind of reset, I think that's good for him and good for the Chiefs. Now it's can the guy who replaces him and takes those snaps, can they start getting some production? Because they haven't been getting it from Marquez. They haven't obviously been getting it from Kadarius like they wanted. I'm not sure that Justin Ross is ready for that. So to me, a lot of it's going to be up to Richie James. And we'll see if the Chiefs fill up to this commitment. More than 2 snaps is 3 snaps. I think Richie James needs more workload than that, but we'll see. Like I said, I hesitate to say better because they could very well be better, but I think they're going to be different, and different might be something that they just need right now to give a spark to that room. Looking here, let's see. And Brandon had a second question. Why do the Chiefs hang on to Justin Ross? There's a lot of talent there. There's absolutely no doubt whatsoever. There's a lot of talent. He just is still a fairly raw receiver, so there's some work to be done. Simon, I'll answer your question real quick, although we were trying to focus on receivers tonight. But Tommy Townsend, is my understanding, is healthy. He did have the problem with the hand a couple of weeks ago, but my understanding is that he is fine. And obviously, he kicked really well yesterday. Andy Reid was pretty happy with him. Del Drake, talking about tight ends, and we'll get touch it real quick, but why we not cut Blake Bell and sign Jody Fortson? Jody Fortson is on IR, and he is for the entire season. He went on before the season started. That was going to be an injury that was going to keep him out all year round. So unfortunately for Jody, he's not an option. The Chiefs do have some tight ends on the practice squad, most notably Matt Bushman. Garrett Prince is on there as well, but he's a little banged up right now. So he's actually on the injured reserve list on practice squad. I believe should be back relatively soon, but it's going to be a few more weeks. Chiefs could get, they could give Matt Bushman a try. I would be interested to see what he has, but obviously the Chiefs still have a lot of faith in Blake Bell. He's got a lot of experience, and interception I can't completely put on him yesterday. I mean, there was a chunk of that Mahomes owned as well. So looking through here and seeing what else we got. Brandon's got a lot of questions tonight. Brandon. Why you continue to take the receivers off the field after making a catch still drives me insane. I mean, it's usually one of two things. I mean, one is that the Chiefs always are going to rotate their receivers, and they especially want to keep them fresh. Now, it's not always the case. I mean, Rashee Rice played 92% of the snaps, so he was almost out there no matter what on Sunday. And that's going to happen from time to time. And you will see receivers make a catch and stay on the drive. I mean, it's really just dependent upon what the next play is and, what package that they're in, because you're going to see a lot of times, I mean, what the Chiefs personnel usage is on a first, second, third down, it's completely different. So if a guy makes a catch for a first down, chance is that there's going to be a different personnel group moving in on the next snap. So, and that's just the way that the Chiefs operate. I mean, that's one of the things is that they have always been a team that rotates their receivers and have different guys in different roles. They're not like some teams that literally have the same player who plays the same role, and therefore, you really only come out when you're tired. Chiefs aren't one of those teams. I mean, they rotate it based on who prepared to play that role that week and, what package that they're in at that particular moment in time. So that's the simplest explanation for it. And usually the one, I mean, there's going to be other reasons too. As far as just a guy coming off after making a catch, probably just bad luck most of the time, unless it's been a long play or the guy had to run a long route and is taking himself out because he's tired and needs a quick breather. But the Chiefs just do a lot of rotation. I mean, that's their MO, and it's obviously worked out well for them in the past. Is it as great when you have a young receiver room, to your point, that you need the maybe more time with Mahomes? I mean, there's a conversation to be had that the Chiefs, and Sam McDowell over the Kansas City Star made this point, early in the season that, are you better off with that many mouths to feed on offense and receiver? I mean, are you spreading yourself so thin that you're not really giving all these young guys a chance to produce? Now that you see the Chiefs are kind of winnowing it down a little bit and focusing on the guys, shortening their bench. I mean, and that's probably a little bit of it, is to make sure that guys do get more reps. Bart, new member, doesn't the loss of Moore actually benefit the receiving core, more reps for others? I mean, you can look at it that way. I mean, it is going to shorten the bench a little bit, and that's one thing that the Chiefs have been trying to do. I mean, they don't want to lose Skyy. I mean, you certainly for depth don't want to lose a player going into the postseason, but yeah, I mean, the Chiefs right now, you can see it. Look at the snap counts. They are winnowing down that position group and trying to get the guys that are performing the best out there right now. And so I described it last night. I'm going to continue using my analogy. It's just like a college basketball team in March, shortening their bench. Instead of going 10, 11 deep, 9, they're only going maybe 6 or 7. I mean, that's what the receivers for the Chiefs are going right now. You're going to see less of, 6 guys deep getting rotated in, and it is only going to be maybe 4 or 5 guys that are getting most of the reps, and probably, honestly, most weeks 4. And let's see, going back through here, I know a lot of notes and everything. I mean, like Jack had a note about hoping McColl comes back healthy. He has reached his 4 weeks that he is eligible to be designated to return. I haven't heard anything suggesting that he's ready for that. Obviously, with a thumb injury for a receiver, you need him to be back fully healthy, and still less than a month removed from his surgery. So hoping we can get an update on McColl this week about just where his progress is and what kind of timeline that the Chiefs have. We'll see if we can find out later this week. Brandon, more questions. I love it. Mahomes, I was upset with Tony. I don't think that he was attacking Tony. I really don't. I mean, was he frustrated? And if you haven't had a chance to listen to Andy Reid today, you can go over to the ChiefsDigest.com. To Monday Notes has Andy Reid video in its entirety, and you also find it here on YouTube. But Andy really, got into what was kind of going through Patrick's head. I mean, he is that way. He is competitive. I mean, he doesn't make a play or somebody doesn't make a play, he's going to get frustrated, and he's going to let that guy know. And that happens on the practice field. I've seen it happen in training camp. I mean, if something doesn't go right, Patrick can be fiery. I mean, most of the time he's a really good teacher. I mean, he'll just come up to a guy and say, "Hey, I need you to do this instead of this on a play." I know, like, for instance, there was a play back in training camp this year with Skyy that they missed connection, and Mahomes ran downfield to meet Skyy and told him, what he needed to do when he saw that coverage, because they missed connections. So he'll do that, but he'll also light into a guy if he needs to. And yeah, he wasn't what we saw on the camera wasn't at Tony. I mean, it was probably more about Tony, but anything that Patrick expressed on camera, I can guarantee you he'll bring it up with Kadarius. I mean, it's not that these guys don't have that kind of relationship on this team where they're just going to be complaining about each other behind his back. I mean, Mahomes will bring it up with Tony directly, and if he feels like he was out of line, I mean, honestly, he'll apologize to Tony for it. But I think he'll probably say, "Hey, Kadarius, I was frustrated because you need to catch that ball, and next time he's like, I'm going to give you another chance. You're going to get more chances, but I need you to catch the ball." That's just the kind of guy that Mahomes is, and as Andy Reid said earlier today, he doesn't want him to change, and I don't think you want Patrick to change at all. Going on through, see if we got any more questions. I love the conversation that you guys have. I really appreciate it. You all have a wonderful discussion in here every one of these. I really enjoy it, and you guys usually have some better answers than maybe I do at times. So appreciate that. Bart, coming back, who's that person that can get us over the hump? I'll get you over the hump. I like Richie James. I really do. I've been impressed by him. I've wanted to see more of him. I've been kind of perplexed why the Chiefs haven't been able to get him more on the field. It's really interesting to me. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Richie a lot more. I mean, he played 2 snaps, and like I said, 3 is more, but I think you need to see double-digit snaps from Richie James and see what he can do, because he's got some pretty sure hands, and he moves quicker than you think. He is a guy who can really work in space, whereas a Rashee Rice is just going to run through some guys like a running back and power you over. Richie is more of a Jerick McKinnon in space. I mean, you get the ball out to him on the edge, he can make some guys miss. And so I think you'd be really surprised what he could do in a larger role. And I think you're going to see it a little bit more. Derrick, nice first name. You think Clyde should play wide receiver more? That's a really intriguing question, because, I mean, Clyde really kind of reminded you yesterday that he's a really good pass catcher, and he's a really good mover with the ball in his hand. So, I mean, getting him on the field where he can, in a passing situation, and the one thing that makes you think it could be a good idea is if you remember back the Super Bowl last year rather, when the Chiefs had so many injuries, there were so many players who were banged up, both at running back and receiver. Clyde played every position on both, first team and scout team that week. I mean, he was playing the zebra, the Z position that splits out wide. I mean, he could play that in some limited snaps. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to just having some packages like that, or and obviously the Chiefs have a lot of plays where they do split out a running back out wide. I wouldn't have any problems playing Clyde Moore in a role like that and giving him a few more snaps after he just reminded you that he's a really good pass catcher and does really good things with a football in his hand. A1 Buds, could KT be a game day inactive this week as some sort of punishment? I'm sure, if he wasn't active this week, I think that Andy Reid would characterize it more of a get your head right moment, just to give him a breather and some time off and relax. I don't think he'll be inactive this week. I think they would still have him because I think they need him for depth. I do. I mean, I'm like Nick and I were talking about earlier, he is a really good special teams player, so I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him in a return specialist role and kind of flipping him and Richie James a little bit as far as snap counts go. But yeah, I mean, either way is possible. I mean, there's a lot of different directions the Chiefs could go. But like I said, I don't think that if they didn't play him this week, I don't think they would term it as punishment. But if anything, I think that the Chiefs kind of want him to be active so that they can at least get him on the field and not completely feel like he's being punished. Real quick for Bart, Pacheco doing well. That's what Andy Reid tells us. And he looked pretty comfortable in the locker room. We got to see him on Friday. So I'm taking Andy at his word that he is going to play against the Raiders, barring any setback. So yeah, I think you'll see him. Mizzou 19, how'd they get Jody's injury timeline wrong? It was all about timing. It really was less about the injury, but more about the timing. I mean, the Chiefs couldn't get him onto the 53 roster when they wanted to be able to then put him on IR to designate him to return. So he went on IR back in August before the season started. And when you go on IR, you can't come back. So you can't be designated to return. So the only thing they could really do now, if he's healthy, yeah, they could conceivably release him, and then you are opening up the possibility that he does get claimed on waivers. I don't know. I mean, it's, I mean, that was really the biggest problem, was the number crunch, as far as, for Jody and be able to keep him. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, with Bell, I think that was a reasonable chance that they could have, but could have waived him and gotten the roster spot, but they didn't want to risk that. But yeah, I mean, for Jody, it's all about timing. So yeah, there is a procedural way that they could get Jody back onto the roster, but it would require exposing him to waivers. And I don't know if you can guarantee that he wouldn't clear waivers, given that if he's healthy. So it's an option. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Chiefs we'll see what happens in the offseason with Jody. And A1 Bud's asking about Powell. I'll tell you what, I mean, we haven't really got to see a lot of Cornell Powell because during the season, I mean, really, you have to go back to what you saw during training camp and the preseason. But I've had people telling me that, Cornell continues to develop. He's been a really good practice squad receiver for the Chiefs. I am a bit surprised that they've never given him an opportunity. Maybe he will get one here in the next few weeks. Montreal Washington maybe as well could get some opportunities. He's another guy that the Chiefs have on the practice squad. They've had some other receivers come through, but those are really the only two guys who continue to stick around. So, and Montreal obviously has been on the 53, and he's been elevated a couple of times from the practice squad. So, still a possibility with him, but I wouldn't be opposed to seeing what Cornell can do. I mean, once again, there's a huge number crunch. The Chiefs have 6 receivers on the active roster, so it's not like that they need to give Cornell a bump up. But if they think he's ready, why not? Let's see. Kind of talking about receiving here. At least it's the tight end group from Bart. What are your thoughts on Noah Gray getting more touches? I mean, I really think that the biggest challenge with getting Noah Gray more touches is that he's backing up Travis Kelce. I mean, the Chiefs are going to, they're going to play a lot of tight ends. They did it this week against the Patriots. I mean, they had plenty of 2 and 3 tight end sets out there. But Noah's been kind of just a consistent, 2 or 3 receiver guy. He still hasn't had that big breakout game yet. I'm kind of waiting for that, where maybe Noah has 4, 5, 6 catches, has a big game, but it's always going to be hard for him because, by and large, he's the second tight end on the field at all times. Anytime he's out there. I mean, there's a few times he's on the field without Travis, but it's not a lot. And, and usually when he gets his most touches and his most effective touches, it's in the opening script. And, it's really in something that the Chiefs have worked on all week and practiced a few different times. I think the one thing about Noah is that he doesn't have the improvisation skills that Travis does, and that's not a knock against him. Just nobody has the improvisation skills that Travis does. But I think that's just only one thing that's only holding him back a little bit from maybe being that guy who gets more touches, because when the Chiefs have things that are designed for Noah, they work out really well. It's just that, you can only have so many plays designed for one player every week. So I think that hampers it a little bit, but hey, Noah's been consistent, and hey, let's see. We may see what happens. I mean, he maybe, especially even next year, maybe he gets more touches next year in a contract year. We'll see what happens. Maybe he's just been kind of kept down a little bit by just how many reps that he gets and how many opportunities he gets to be the primary tight end on a play. Elijah, no one has actually asked about Zach Ertz tonight. So, I mean, still no word. I guess Zach is still out there thinking about things, maybe seeing where his best trip to a Super Bowl could go through. I mean, I would assume that Kansas City and Philadelphia would be the 2 best options, but maybe he's just waiting for the right spot for him. I mean, I would think that once again, the toughest thing about coming to Kansas City is that, as you kind of point out, he'd be the third tight end. I mean, I think you'd still say that you want Kelsey and Gray out there. They know the offense. Zach would have, if he came into this team at this point in the season, would only have a few handful of plays that he'd have down. So you would have to be a little bit like Noah Gray in the sense that maybe you have a few things in the script for him in the opening 15 plays. Maybe you have a third down play with him that you really like. I mean, you'd have maybe a half dozen options for him each week, and maybe he gets the ball a couple of times. I mean, and maybe you also just let Zach Ertz play on the opposite side of Travis Kelce and freelance a little bit and let Patrick try and find him. I mean, that's an option too. But at what point, ball's in the court of Zach Ertz. I mean, I guess we will see. I'll take one more question here from Brenton and let you all go, and you can catch up. I haven't seen what's been happening on Monday night yet, so we can go catch the game. Any concerns with FAU? The slime is good, but still should be able to get some snaps. I'm hearing a lot of the same excuse that we heard about Skyy last season. No, I mean, I think it's 2 different situations between, Felix and Adike Uzama and Skyy Moore last year. Skyy was obviously a bit more of a raw player coming in. But the expectation was that he could come in and play immediately. With Felix, remember, he came in with an injury. He had that surgery on his hand during draft prep, which the Chiefs knew all about. I mean, there was no surprise there. And they always kind of expected that this year was going to be a bit of a redshirt year for him. The thought with Felix for this season and drafting him where they did was, one, I mean, he was what they thought was the best available player at that spot. They thought he was definitely a first-round talent. At the end of the first round, it was at a position of need, especially for the future, because, hey, Mike Dan is in a contract year. Who is your starting defensive end opposite George Karlaftis next season? I mean, you need a guy to come in and step in and be that replacement. And so the expectation was, hey, this could be a redshirt year for Felix. If some guys get hurt and you need him to play a bunch, they felt like he was capable of that. But remember, Felix, he not only had the hand injury, he's a late bloomer too. I mean, he grew up fast, and he was still a little bit, I think, skinny coming in here for, what the Chiefs like for their defensive linemen. So what has he been able to do this year as a defensive end? I mean, he's been able to learn from some really good players. He's been able to watch Chris Jones. He's been able to watch George Karlaftis, watch Mike Dana. I mean, he's getting some really good experience there. He's had a chance to muscle up and beef up a little bit. I think that's good because I think I think the Chiefs were comfortable with him getting a little bit more size, and you're going to see him play with that size next year. So it hasn't really been anything about not going to plan. I mean, if anything, I think it was just that once again, probably expectations were too high because you think of a first round draft pick coming in and playing immediately. But the Chiefs weren't in that position. They didn't feel like they had to rush him. So right now it's working out exactly how they planned. I mean, if they needed him in the second half of the season to play a lot like Karlaftis did last year, and two, I would say that that's probably a good comparison as far as just where Karlaftis was last year and where Felix is this year. Karlaftis was much more developed. I mean, especially because he'd been a bigger, player for a while. Felix, really 3 years ago wasn't really even defensive end size. He kind of just grew into that position the last couple of years. So I'd say don't get down on Felix. I mean, I think he's going to be fine. I mean, let's wait until next year to get the grade on him, because to me, this was always going to be a redshirt year. It's an incomplete season for him. But that's nothing to be unexpected. Wait till next year. And I think you might be surprised just how big of a leap he takes in year 2. Truly appreciate you, everybody, coming in tonight. I didn't necessarily mean to talk so long, but having Nick here was great. And then, of course, I guess also I need to figure out how to make sure the buttons work on streaming so that we don't start 8 minutes late and I'm not talking by myself for 5 minutes. I really appreciate everybody. Thank you for putting up with me. We'll be back on the stream tomorrow night for the full Q&A, where you can ask anything you want to, any position. We won't just talk about receivers. We'll talk about everything. See if we have any more news to report tomorrow. I think it'll be a little bit quieter day for the Chiefs. We will see. But appreciate everybody coming in. Subscribe, do all those fun things. Anything you can do to help people find the YouTube stream, I really, truly appreciate it. And we will see you all Tuesday night. Take care, and thanks a lot.